This episode of the Accounting Insiders podcast is brought to you in part by Xero. Xero is a powerful cloud accounting software that improves efficiencies across your practice. With all client data stored on a single unified ledger, you and your clients can easily access and collaborate on the same set of books. Xero's advisor tools and automation solutions reduce time-consuming manual tasks and put data entry on autopilot. Work faster and more efficiently than ever before with Xero. Visit xero.com/accounting insiders to learn more. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Accounting Insiders podcast. My name is Gary DeHart. I'm the host of the Accounting Insiders podcast and the publisher managing partner of Insightful Accountant. And my guest today is Michelle LeBlanc. Michelle works with us on she's part of our Be Insightful premium content community, and she is an HR human resources specialist. And so she does a every other month webinar series that is focusing on human resource topics. And she just did a webinar yesterday that I had to miss. It was a holiday. We didn't realize it when we booked it, but Michelle came anyway and did her thing. So I was going to ask Michelle, well, first, welcome. Thanks for taking some time and today and yesterday. But I did just want to see if you could just recap what you talked about yesterday, and then we'll have a couple of questions for you, and then we'll let you get it back to your business.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me again, Gary. And we were sorry to miss you yesterday, but we spent the session talking about HR strategies that can be useful and effective in specifically high regulation industries. And when we talk about high regulation industries, we specifically were focusing on, well, finance in general, right? If you're dealing with
Right.
people's finances at all, I firmly believe that is a very highly regulated industry. Any sort of industry where you have oversight from some sort of governing agency, that you have to adhere to levels of compliance that maybe every single LLC or every single corporation does not necessarily have to because of the industry that you're in. So we talked about finance. Healthcare is a good one. Oil and gas, any type of energy. So I've worked with a lot of, a good one is solar clients throughout the years, especially now that that sector is growing. Wind energy, again, any kind of energy. And then we also things that you may not think about, firearms, alcohol, tobacco, and even legal cannabis in the United States. These are all industries that are considered high regulation, meaning you got to take another level of, look at your compliance when it comes to everything across the board. Many companies, especially the large, mid-sized to larger ones, are going to have a lot of times dedicated departments or people that handle just the compliance piece. A lot of times this can fall in spaces like safety, health, safety, regulatory kind of groups. But for our smaller teams, a lot of the folks that listened yesterday are going to be your, individual contributors that maybe sit in a larger firm that could be servicing some of these industries. Some of these could be CPAs and accounting professionals that these are their clients.
Mhm.
And it's really important to understand who is the person within the organization or people that do have, their kind of hand on the pulse of this compliance piece. When it comes to the people aspect, the reason that's so important, and I actually ironically had a conversation on a call this morning I did not expect to be on with a client that is in the energy sector. We were talking quite a bit about the culture of safety and how, it really plays into who gets hired, as far as if you're contracting different companies to do certain work. If your company looks and feels a lot more compliant, put together, like you've got your I's, dotted and T's crossed, you're
Mhm.
going to be much more appealing to a customer that's looking to purchase your services in some sort of way than maybe the company next to you that they're also looking at that they can't really answer the questions of, okay, well, do you have XYZ in place? Do your employees have this particular certification? How do you guys handle this type of, meeting these standards that OSHA or whoever put out? So we had this really, really healthy conversation that led into what we're talking about today, because HR is imperative when it comes to ensuring that your people are compliant to whatever standards these regulatory agencies are wanting you to be at. And you have to have someone, whether it's in-house, maybe it's someone with like a dual role within safety and people, maybe it's an admin that's also handling your personnel, or someone outsourced like myself. But someone needs to be having some oversight to understand what people need, what you have to do to make sure that you're not getting in trouble. And then it's also from a compliance piece to retain those individuals.
Mhm.
You hire a driller on an offshore oil rig, and 3 years later, you never check up on any certifications or licenses or anything like that. You could get yourself in a pickle, when audits come. And same goes for, nurses, doctors, accountants, and, myself included, when it comes to certain certifications, keeping those compliant, but also what are those standards that you have to adhere to based on whatever industry it is, because every industry that's in high regulation, you're going to have different oversight entities, and knowing who those are, knowing what their standards are, and knowing how to ensure that you are staying off of their radar is really the goal when it comes to having someone in HR space looking at highly regulated industries.
Gotcha. So, I told you there'd be some questions that I didn't tell you what they were beforehand, but as you talked, this helps me kind of develop my question. Um, so, our primary audience is small to mid-size, accounting firms, right? There might be a CPA, there might be a tax person, an EA, they may be a bookkeeper, they may be, an accounting. I don't, an accountant may just call themselves an accountant. Um, but they're working with small business clients. The profession has been telling them for the past 20 years, be an advisor. Hasn't always been called advisor. It's been named 15 different things over the past 20 years. But, right now it's about client advisory services or advisory services, which seems that should be what they're doing anyway. From an HR perspective, because one thing that we do see in feedback from our reader studies and our audience profiles, you know, they want to grow their businesses and they're looking for opportunities. So your world is human resources. So let's say I'm an accounting pro. I have clients. What are some ways that I can either assist them, not that I'm an HR professional, but maybe some of the gotchas that I need to be aware of or listening for that I can tell them, hey, you may need to dig a little deeper on that. Or hey, you know what? You need to call Michelle because this is way outside of my world and way outside of your understanding. But what are some ways, again, sticking with advisory, that an accounting professional can increase their value to their client just by asking a couple of questions, not trying to solve the problem for them, but just raise the question. Hey, did you know that X? And sorry, I put you on the spot with that. It was a very long way to get to my
Nope.
question, and this is a test for you. So I'm an accounting pro. What are some key questions I can ask my clients to make me more valuable to them from an HR
Sure.
perspective?
Sure. Well, hopefully I can pass the test. I
All
will
right.
try my best. And it came up yesterday, actually. Um, One of the gotchas, and I think that finance and accounting is going to see, or at least have come up, and that we see often, not just in high regulation industries, but across the board, I think it's even more critical when we're talking high reg industries is how are we classifying our employees and are we doing it correctly? I've had this conversation on different webinars with Insightful Accountant. I've had this conversation with a lot of different people over the years. And that's something that because of the finance space where all of our professionals are going to sit, that's a question that they can pose to their customers, to their leadership teams, however they're structured because especially in highly regulated industries, when you have that much oversight, so let's take a step back. In any business, we need to ensure that we're classifying our employees correctly, correct?
Hmm.
We need to either, they need to either be 1099 contractors or they need to be an employee with a W 2. There are very gray guidelines out there on how we are to classify employees. I would say that many small businesses, especially right out of the gate, people that don't have a lot of the bandwidth, they don't have a lot of the deep pockets, and they don't have necessarily a dedicated HR resource all the time. It's a lot easier. I think we all know to just classify everybody as contractors because that's the easy thing to do. You don't
Right.
have to have a whole lot in place to do it. End of the year or beginning of the year, you send them their 1099, they're responsible for doing all of that. However, that can get very, questionable just in a normal industry of consulting or, you sell cookies, whatever it is. Um, but you're going to have so much more visibility, so much more oversight, and so much more accountability to different regulators in high regulated industries.
Hmm.
Gary, we were talking about manufacturing earlier this morning, and you hear the term OSHA, and people kind of clench up and get real nervous. OSHA is not; it doesn't have oversight in every industry. But if you're in an industry where you are already having oversight from an entity like that, and you're kind of teetering the line of maybe some of my employees probably should be maybe some of my contractors really are employees or vice versa. It's something that finance, I believe, has they do have a leg to stand on because their role, very similar to HR, is mitigating risk for the company and protecting the
Hmm.
company. Is it something that's going to get your entire operation shut down if OSHA comes in and says, "Hey, Michelle is categorized as a contractor and really she should be a W-2 employee"? I don't know. I would say hopefully not, but we don't
Right.
know, right? And so I'm of the camp of, hey, let's not take the risk if we don't need to. And so bringing it back to your original question, I think that what I hear just on a daily basis, but even more important in industries such as this, is where that finance can come in. Is really pushing to. We need to make sure that we're regularly auditing. We need to make sure that as we're onboarding people, that we are hiring them the correct way. And that even goes into, how are we creating job descriptions and postings for certain jobs? How are we if we're thinking about workforce planning, is this person going to be a contractor or an employee? How are we deciphering that? And then be able to strategically make plans going forward to do it the right way.
Yeah, and that can be um, just that one thing right there. Pretty low hanging fruit,
Very.
and most accounting pros are already dialed in with kind of the regulatory world anyway.
Hmm.
And I don't know what the form would be, but there's some IRS description somewhere, right? That if nothing else, go to your client and say, "Hey, let's just do a pulse check here,
Yep.
because even though you may not be paying me for this service, if I, as a professional, as an accounting pro, as your trusted advisor, can bring this to you and either help mitigate risk or help you actually, maybe it's reverse. Maybe you find out that you're actually able to classify more people as a 1099 if you just
Yeah.
ask the question and spend on the size of the company, spend a few minutes checking that out. And I'm sure, are there any others that come to mind? I mean, the 1099 one is pretty low hanging fruit. Any other ones that you've come across that you're like, you know what, you should be asking these three questions every client?
Something else, and the direct correlation sometimes with finance is hard to see, but training and continuous development within your teams is something
Mm.
that is and tracking that is incredibly important. I think the tie-in there with finance is the accountants, the financial professionals. Those are going to be the ones that are going to see the costs involved when we're budgeting for training activities,
Mhm.
as well as the cost spend on training and development for our teams. When it goes, again, talking about these high regulation industries, you're talking about, I have several clients that I've worked with that are these small to mid-sized firms, right? We're talking like 20 to 50, 60 people. And that's kind of where a lot of these solar companies, especially these solar install companies around the country, are
Yeah.
kind of sitting in that sweet spot. Their techs have to have a slew of certifications and trainings that they have to, check the box on before they're even allowed to be deployed out
Okay.
to different job sites. I also think about things, and not just solar, but with any sort of business where you have folks that are driving vehicles, when you have employees or contractors that are around any sort of, homeowners, property owners, business owners. There's a lot of liability and risk in there, and so there's a whole deal on background checks and who needs
Mm.
what and what kinds of background checks and driving records and all of that stuff when it comes to the compliance piece. Again, finance has a lot of visibility on these spaces when it comes to the training and development of employees, because of the cost involved. So I think when it comes to high reg industries, because the training piece is can be so significant, you're going to have training matrices that are based off of whatever the governing entities are saying you have to do, right? So
Yep.
we have to make sure that we have the financials in place to be able to back that training and development. And we need to make sure that those are being tracked appropriately. So again, that, driller Bob doesn't go 3 years with, an expired drilling certification.
Right.
And, Gary, Insightful Accountant, does a lot of it, providing, as we go through and provide education, providing CE
Mhm.
hours. It's very similar to, what we would do in a high reg industry, just needing to budget for it. So I would say finance having that pulse also in that training and development space, is going to be really important as well, no matter how big your team is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, tell you what, here's the three things I got out of this, and then we will wrap up. So, from an accounting pro standpoint, three fairly low-hanging things that they can discuss with their client. One, classification,
Yep.
1099 versus employee. Let's cover that. Certifications. Hey, you know, and again, not saying I can get them certified, just saying, hey,
Right.
Mr. Customer, are you sure that your field team is up in certifications?
Yep.
And if it's not a certified industry, it's funny, my son currently is trying to kick off he's in college and he and his roommate are trying to do some pressure washing and just to make some money here and there. And I'm like, dude, that you can make so much money doing that. Um, and my brother's in commercial real estate, so we call my brother. He's like, hey, can I get some jobs? And his first question is, are you insured?
Are
Right.
you insured?
And and that goes to the next one. So we got 1099, so proper classification, proper certifications, depending on what business you're in, and then or training. Again, it may not be certification, but if you got some dude out there with a pressure washer, you know, he better know how to use it, and he better know what not to hit and what to hit and how far to
Sure.
stand back, right? And then that could certainly come into your insurance and your liability. So those are three great topics that, as a accounting professional who is again not a consultant in, well, they could help with 1099, certainly not a consultant in the other two in most cases, but a great way to serve your client. Hey, let's take 20 minutes and let's look at the one of these three things, in our monthly meetings or quarterly meetings, what have you. So that's great. I'm glad we were able to have this short conversation, and it's funny that it did actually tie into what you talked about yesterday. And but how do people connect with you? because Michelle is a consultant. I touched base on that on the front end. So she works with both clients directly, but then you also work with accounting firms to help with either with the firm or with their clients. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
So after spending a very, very long time in big corporate, spaces, I now support small to mid-sized businesses. And the nice thing about being able to be a partner with Insightful Accountant is anybody that comes to us from these platforms, we offer a complimentary half hour with myself to sit down and dig through anything that you would like to. There's no obligation to do anything, there's no cost involved. If you want to have a conversation about just any of the topics that are on any of our webinar series, but it's really just to kind of offer that peace of mind. Maybe you've got some questions, you don't have an internal HR person. That's really what we're here for. And talking about any of these topics, risk mitigation, hiring, any sort of thing that you could think of in the HR space. That's what we do.
And how would they find you if they wanted to do that?
So you can connect with me through our website. It's evolvedhrx.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And I believe you can find me through Insightful Accountant as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, Michelle, thank you so much. It was good catching up with you. Again, sorry I missed yesterday, but certainly appreciate you being here today and yesterday, and we will certainly talk very soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so
All right.
much, Gary.
Thank you. All righty. Bye bye.
Bye bye.